Greetings, everybody. My name is Travis Christofferson. I'm going to be hosting this webinar today. Brief introduction of who I am. I entered the cancer space for the first time in academia, and then as an author of books on cancer and healthcare system. I'm the founder of a foundation for metabolic cancer therapies that is conducting trials on the ketogenic diet at Cedars-Sinai in the United States, and one of the co-founders of Astron Health. We have an incredible panel today, including Jane McClelland, Amanda King, Dr. Hari Kuhan, Dr. Padman Devon, and Dale Atkinson. We're going to skip the formal inductions right now and have the panel briefly introduce themselves later for the sake of time. We have an hour. I think most of you know the members of this panel anyway, and the guest of honor today is Dale Atkinson. If you follow Dale on various social media platforms, you know that he has a remarkable story and has become an extraordinary advocate for the cancer community writ large. In his own words, quote, "If you're wondering why I'm connected with you, it's simply I'm growing my network to increase awareness of cancer in all forms and how it affects the daily lives of those afflicted, and hopefully to share a few laughs along the way. If that visibility helps even one person access the right support or treatment, it's worth it." Dale is one of those rare individuals that brings people together. He has a remarkable charisma. He does this with a sense of humor. He writes with an amazing clarity and genuine authenticity. The goal of this webinar is simple. It's in the title: How Dale Atkinson and his care team navigated cancer with personalized medicine from diagnosis to direction. Learn how Dale took charge of his cancer treatment journey with a multidisciplinary team. And I think we all know the majority of people, when they're diagnosed with cancer, will ask their primary oncologist, what else can I do? And this is the focus. What else is there in adjunctive oncology? And when we say adjunctive oncology, it's defined as therapies that do not aim to replace standard of care, but aim to enhance it in a variety of ways, chiefly by weakening cancer cells, either by directly inhibiting various oncogenic pathways or influencing the microenvironment that cancer cells are trying to survive within, support the immune system, and help healthy cells become more robust to resist toxicity. So examples of adjunctive care include lifestyle modifications, diet, which many people have questions about, exercise, sleep, stress reduction, and this broad category of drug repurposing that we're going to get into, which is the off-label use of broad categories of medications, including some natural products. We're going to focus on how you navigate this pursuit by getting the right information and building the right team. So we have about an hour, so we're going to keep this as informal as we can. We're going to start with Dale, the star of the show. I think we all want to hear his story, and then we will have the panel weigh in on what their role was on Dale's care team, and their expertise in cancer care and their advice. So with that, Dale, I'm going to hand you the microphone. You take this wherever you want, but I think we just want to hear that narrative of your story, how you sifted through the information that was out there and became the architect of your own sort of multidisciplinary treatment plan and team. So we'll let you take it from there, Dale.
Yeah, first of all, well, thank you very much, Travis. That was a lovely intro. First things first from me, I think probably the most important person in my care team is actually missing today. And it's my partner, Anna. We have two little toddlers at home, so suddenly she wasn't able to be here. But I think of everybody, and sorry guys, but she is probably the most important of it all. So firstly, heads up and thank you to her. So then moving on to my story. So I think let's start all the way back at the beginning. So prior to all of this, I was a compliance consultant. I used to work for some of the biggest banks and asset managers in the world. I was really sort of top of my game, working 14, 16 hours a day, and put myself into a position where I was sort of leading investigations into presidents and all these sorts of things on behalf of, large institutions globally. Fast forward to 2024, I'd set up my own consultancy. I was doing pretty well for myself. I was working a lot of hours, obviously launching a business and with two toddlers. And I found myself in a position where I was actually due to sign a multi-million-pound contract for a high street retail bank in the UK. And, life was really, really good. And then unfortunately, in the summer of 2024, my partner had a funny turn. We were ended up ringing 111, as it's called here in the UK, which is a non-emergency line. Ended up speaking to a doctor. They thought she'd had a heart attack, so they sent an ambulance. She was rushed off to hospital, and it turned out through an X-ray that actually she had a small cell lung carcinoma. So she then went in for an operation. She went in for a full lobectomy. She had the upper right lobe of her lung removed in early October, on the 3rd of October, 2024. She had just gotten home. So I'd been suffering with some symptoms for a while, but she had just gotten home when I went in to have an endoscopy done. So I'd been suffering with heartburn for several years. I'd been suffering with a little bit of acid reflux in my sleep, waking up choking on acid. I'd been having a few digestional problems as well. I'd been going to my GP on and off for a few years. Eventually, having moved down to London into a little area just near Reading, we ended up in a position where, or ended up in a point where my GP decided it was actually now worth escalating. And the first step of that was to send me in for an endoscopy. So I turned up to this endoscopy on my youngest little boy's birthday, which is the 15th of October. And unfortunately, it was one of those where during the endoscopy itself, because I'd chosen not to have the anesthetic, because obviously Anna couldn't drive me, they put the camera down and it was there. There was a very large, very aggressive calcified tumor. It was there on the screen in front of me. I could hear the doctors talking about it. And the lady, the doctor who was giving me the endoscopy, turned around at the end of it and said, "Look, I'm really sorry. It's cancer." Sadly for me, I then had a further sort of 2-week wait until I was then in to see an oncologist. So I had to wait for an MDT meeting, which is a multidisciplinary team meeting, where they discussed the outcome of that scan, of that endoscopy, and a scan I'd had as well. And then I went in to meet an oncologist. And the first thing they said to me, and it was a meeting that lasted only about 3 minutes. The first thing they said to me was, "I'm really sorry. It's cancer. It's stage 4. It's incurable. It's inoperable. There is very little we can do for you." And at that point, they shook my hand, sent me out of the room, and that was it. That was the conversation over. And sadly, it very much felt like that. I was given no options, no choices. I wasn't discussed anything about treatment at all. It was a, "Here you go. Here's your diagnosis. There's little we can do from you. So sorry, sorry, mate. That's it. Goodbye." So for me, that wasn't enough of an answer. I sort of walked away and, having a lot on with Anna, etc., came home, had a bit of a breakdown, unfortunately, because as we all do. And that breakdown led me to the feeling that this can't be it. This can't be my life. That can't be at 35 years old at that point in time. That can't be everything. I can't be done at this point. This can't be my outcome. So I started researching. And that led me to the likes of Jane's fantastic book, How to Starve Your Cancer. Eventually, that led me to, well, first of all, putting a post out on LinkedIn, and second of all, receiving about 15,000 messages offering hope, support, offering ways forward, offering things to research and look into. And from that, I started to pick through and to find little sort of nuggets of hope. And part of that was from a gentleman, a naturopath called Martin Gillespie, based up in Scotland, who put me onto the amazing Amanda King, who is a wonderful, truly wonderful and amazing naturopath and nutritionist. That also led me to Jane directly, who's become a friend, who's become an advisor, who's become, well, an advocate in my journey as well. And then eventually that led me to, firstly, Dr. Andy Geyer, who then led me to Astron Health, and also led me to Dr. Hari Kuhan. And essentially, Hari has been the backbone of my journey. Amanda has then been my absolute savior for everything. She's helped me to put together everything I needed. She's helped me to understand. She's helped me to piece together the bits of information I needed along my way, and to use what Hari had given me as a backbone from the integrative side, to then plug that through into a real world application of it. And then on top of that, we also then undertook the next generation sequencing. I then undertook the next generation sequencing via Astron Health. And we then used that for Hari to further build a far more personalized protocol atop it. And that has then, very thankfully for me, led me to where I am today. So from October 2024 through to my last scan, which was back in June, we have now got my 9.2 centimeter main tumor has disappeared. The 3.6 centimeter secondary that was on my aorta has disappeared. And I have no further or no more metastases. I have no lymph node involvement, nothing that's left at this moment in time. And I'm now at the point where I'm waiting for a PET scan, which should come in October, to verify whether I have now reached no evidence of disease, so NED. At that point, Travis, I will pass back to you to decide who you would like to pick up next.
Thank you, Dale. That was amazing. Yeah, there's a lot of content there. I think what we can do, let's go to the panel now, your team, your care team. If we could have you each give a brief introduction to yourselves and then talk about how you participated in Dale's care, what your area of expertise and methodology is in this sort of adjunctive care team. We can start. Why don't we start with you, Dr. Kuhan?
Hi, everyone. Dale, that was amazing. I just kind of want to sit here and listen to you talk. So it's such a beautiful story, and thank you so much for putting it so eloquently. Everybody, so I'm Harry. A fair number of you will probably know me. And also my work with Dr. Pad over the years, our relationship working in adjunctive protocols and repurposed medicines. My background is actually in medical oncology. So I live in Watford in North London, but I trained throughout central London, St. Bartholomew's Hospital, UCL, the Royal Marsden, developed a lot of experience, I guess, in solid tissue cancers, prescribing chemo, immunotherapy. I spent some time in research, and so I performed a PhD looking into cancer cell metabolism in pancreatic cancer cells, actually, and cancer stem cells more specifically, which kind of opened my eyes to the ideas of the metabolic approach in general. As you can imagine, when preparing for a big science endeavor, you do a lot of background reading, and it was quite apparent to me that there was a lot there for the repurposing of medicines, let alone the metabolic approaches and the signaling systems. Flash forward a little bit, worked in early phase clinical trials or phase 1 and 2 trials in London at a unit called Sherry Cannon Research Institute, which again inspired me, the fact that there were so many innovative ideas, though the reality would obviously be that patients would often not meet inclusion-exclusion criteria. So a blend of that experience and a piqued interest in cancer metabolism as a thing or a target, let alone innovation, prompted me to want to seek a different path in my career. I worked at a clinical care oncology clinic alongside Pad for some years, learned a lot with him, and learned from each other, and ultimately faced thousands of patients inspired to do more for themselves, inspired by works such as Travis's work and James, of course, work and How to Starve Cancer. I'd had to evolve as a doctor to become more appreciative of the role of other things, because, of course, as a conventional doctor, we don't often get exposed to said things or conversations, or we certainly try and steer away from said conversation, shall we be honest? So I found myself with an opportunity to evolve a little bit more, certainly be less abrasive than the typical normal doctor, learn from what I saw in front of me, look at patients' bloods, and eventually, with experience and time and due diligence, felt more comfortable and competent in trying to counsel patients in these other directions with a conventional doctor hat on at the same time, of course, worrying about interactions, the impact on liver function, all the things that typically we get fear-mongered about, of course, in these conversations with conventional teams. Flash forward again, through again the hard work of Pad, I became more aware of the role of functional sort of testing, in vitro testing, sensitivity testing, the role of next generation sequencing. So all of these buzzwords I'm throwing about that Pad, I'm sure, will open up a bit more about, but Tempest testing, of course, the DATAR testing, just looking for some form of signal to help, again, refine plans for the individual, because we often would start with the academic sort of supporting of why we would maybe add in X, Y, and Z supplements or an integrative therapy like vitamin C or a repurposed medicine. Something care oncology actually nailed quite well in terms of the selection process, but off the back of a very reputable chemist and innovator. But there was more to be achieved. This idea of tailoring the sort of treatment plans to the individual in the conventional sense. We'll talk about precision medicine, precision oncology. But again, I think what often happens in these kinds of conversations with well-informed people, we try and be 10 years ahead of the curve. Can we find out these mutations? What do we do with this mutational information? Is it simply a case of looking for a trial? More often than not, there isn't a trial. But can we do anything with this? And this is what's been pioneered so well by Astron Health, utilizing these sort of platforms to figure out these nuances for the individual. And I've been blessed enough to be able to be involved with Dale's journey and applying that experience, which forgive me for taking the time up, but just explaining to try and apply that experience to then the nuances of the medicines. Which medicines are safe? What are the right dosages? How do we do this safely and tactfully? What are the interactions we look out for? What works with what? Those kinds of, aspects to this. And so I, with again, the input of obviously this wider team here and Dale's and his partners, commitment, was happy to be involved with sort of structuring that together off the premise of the information garnered by Pad and his team. And as I said, I'm grateful to say that clearly that's been working out really well for him. But as you can see, that a cohesive team is needed. This is about a multifaceted approach. It's not about one person in isolation. And clearly, this is what's led to this fruition of success. So very grateful.
Yeah, well said. Wonderful. And that's something I think everybody's interested in, is you get you're a unicorn, obviously, Dr. Kuhan, where in traditional oncology, we most people will say, when you bring these things up, the doctor will say, well, there's not enough data. Which brings us to a larger question of the different sorts of calculus that doctors go through versus patients, the risk-reward ratios, and why we do what we do, looking at other forms of data, retrospective data, smaller clinical trial data. So with that same sort of thread, that segues to you, Dr. Mahmoud and Pad, talking about genetic mutations, how we can use this sort of coupling of drug repurposing with genomic reports.
Yeah, well, firstly, thank you very much for inviting us here, Dale. Really amazing and very humbled to be here. I think for anyone who hasn't read Dale's post, I'm sure most people have, you write more beautifully than I've ever spoken in any consultation. My wife agrees. So thank you for all you've done. And I think what you've done is you've also been a bridge from some of the magnificent people here, patients, advocates, doctors, researchers, scientists, and the conventional world as well. I think that the traction that people talking about you, I've had a couple of oncologists from the States reach out to me and say, who's this Dale Atkinson guy? He talks a lot of sense. So keep doing it. So I thought I don't want to talk for too long, but I just wanted to take a step back. Harry's, the great Harry, as someone described him to me the other day, has talked a little bit about our background at Care Oncology. I just wanted to take a step back and just talk a little bit about why we built Astron, where it fits in, because clearly the most important thing here are people, Dale, his wife, his family, people like Jane, Amanda, Harry, who do a lot more hard work than I will ever do. But I think we have this very nice position here as a research organization, which helps to facilitate the expertise. Everything that I'm going to talk about is stuff that people like Harry could do if they had 30 hours per patient to do it, right? We are just trying to bring these solutions to every patient, irrespective of where they are in the world, who their doctors are, how much they know about this, okay? And we're trying to do it in a way that is proportionate, tolerable, cost-effective. So like Harry, my career was very traditional. I studied natural sciences at Cambridge, was born to two doctors, did medicine at King's College London, and was kind of on an academic training pathway in central London at the sort of nexus of clinical pharmacology and oncology. But I realized quite early on that I was just becoming quite disillusioned. And I looked at the professors around me, and generally the concern was more about prestige and publications than with actual patient impact. And they were all good people wanting to do good things, but they were in a system of inertia, and it's hard to change that from the inside. So I rebelled, joined Care Oncology, some amazing people, Robin and Greg, who started it up, and eventually became medical director. And in 2019, we actually published a pretty landmark study in this world, I think, in glioblastoma, which is the most aggressive type of brain cancer. And we used a 4-drug protocol, a very generic 4-drug protocol. And across about 100 patients, it seemed to almost, result in a doubling of survival. But my concern was when I looked more deeply into the data, the real responses were occurring in about 30 to 40% of patients. And that was great, but I wanted to work out what we were missing from the other 60%. And I thought it was personalization. We were giving the same protocol to everyone, regardless of the type of cancer, their terrain, the molecular profile of their cancer, their blood tests, their liver function, their cytochromes, their microbiome, whatever else you want to look at. And that realization really drove Travis and I to build Astron, which is a system that could finally make cancer treatment truly personalized. And I remember meeting you, Dale. I think before I even introduced myself, you screamed the words personalized and precision to me. And I said, hi, yeah, you can call me that too. But at that point, I kind of realized that was a light bulb moment. So I think the problem we're trying to solve at Astron really is that fundamentally conventional oncology is rigid. It's built on standardized protocols, surgery, radio, chemo, things that are designed to eliminate cancer cells. And that's how we measure success. Has the tumor shrunk on the scan? Has the markers gone down? There isn't a real focus at targeting recurrent spread, the molecular vulnerabilities that are still there. If we look at the parallel with cardiovascular medicine, if I walked in, apologies to people that I've used this, metaphor one before, but if I walk in with a heart attack tomorrow, the priority is to open up the blood vessel that's causing the blockage, obviously. And that's a bit like the surgery, the chemo, the radio, right? That's the bit that's going to save my life in the short term. But as soon as that's done, the focus switches completely to prevention. Cardiovascular doctors, cardiologists look at failure as that patient who's had one heart attack ever having a second one. And that secondary prevention is aggressive. Public health money is poured into it. The trials done on secondary prevention cost trillions of pounds. There's way more money that's been spent on optimizing cholesterol and blood pressure and diabetes and getting people to stop smoking than has ever been spent on which stent is the best or which bypass graft is the best. Okay. And that's the bit that I feel that we're missing in cancer. And clearly cancer is much more complex. But the thing that led us to launch Astron now is the diminishing price of molecular testing, which is still very expensive, but it has come down significantly in price over the last 10 years, together with machine learning and AI, gives us the tools now to be able to fill that gap, to create personalized protocols for every patient. Okay. And just to give you a bit of an idea of some of the numbers, at the moment, if we just look at genetics, and cancer we know is much more than genetics, but looking at genes, looking at the transcriptome, which is the RNA, kind of looking at the instructions to the cell and the mechanisms by which those instructions are carried out, it gives us a lot of information, not just what's happening with the genes, but what's happening metabolically, what's happening with the microbiome, with the immune system, etc. But at the moment, precision oncology, practiced by conventional cancer doctors, have drugs for about 46 different genes across all types of cancers. Now we know that there are at least 750 cancer-driving genes already. So we can hit about 7% of them. So it's like looking for a needle in about 10 haystacks. What we have done at Astron is really exploit all of the data that is already out there. So we've pre-trained our model on 170,000 papers, PubMed, other sources, where we've looked at every single drug, whether it's an oncology drug, whether it's a repurposed drug, things like metformin or statins or nebendazole or other things, or supplements that Amanda, I'm sure, will talk about, or lifestyle interventions, things like caffeine and ketogenic diets and whatever else it might be. And we've looked very, very objectively at what their targets are, what those interventions actually do biologically in the body. Do they hit proteins? Do they hit genes? Do they hit pathways? Do they mitigate things? And then we rank the evidence by how good it is. And that's a very objective thing. And by doing that process, we've gone from being able to hit 7% of mutations to about 10 times that much, which is quite incredible. Okay. And I think what we've done for Dale, and we hope to do for many, many years, and what we want to do for every patient is really to take the molecular information that is available from the testing that is available and interpret it in a way that makes it clinically actionable for people like Harry. So, we are looking at the vulnerabilities of each person's tumor, not one tumor at a time. This is not one mutation, one drug. That might work for a short amount of time, but it's a bit like if the heart, patient in front of you has got a high blood pressure and a high cholesterol and smokes, and you treat their high blood pressure, it's not going to do an awful lot of good. We need to do multiple things at the same time. And that's what we do at Astron. The other bit to what we do is data. right? To get this conventionally accepted, to get real doctors running trials, etc., we need to understand not just what the best scientific evidence is, but what the best clinical outcome evidence is. And that's why following people like Dale, and I hope a lot more of you in the future, gives us the scientific grounding to be able to say, this is not just case studies of 10 patients or 100 patients. This is real world studies of 50,000 patients over 5 years, and this approach works. And this is why it works. And we're going to show it to you. And actually, what's surprising is that the traction we've had within the NHS, within academic groups, within the UK, has been massive, because it's a quest to get that data. So I think I'm going to leave it there. Sorry for talking for so long, but Dale, for me, your story just shows what's possible when you give patients and their doctors and their caregivers and advocates and everyone else access to this kind of precision. So thank you.
Thanks, Pad. So Jane, I think that, as Dale said, one of his first exposures into this world of adjunctive drug repurposing was your book. And I think that is the story for a lot of people. And in my tiny town of Rapid City, South Dakota, there's about 7 cancer books in our new Barnes and Nobles, and yours is front and center. So you have done more to shine this light and bring exposure to this concept of drug repurposing. And you came at it from a metabolic angle, right? And that's something you and I share, is the importance of cancer metabolism. So go ahead, the floor is yours.
Dale, brilliant, fantastic for getting all of us together. Amazing. And what we need is more of this kind of collaboration between different people with different skills, looking at not just the metabolism, but looking at the genetic side as well. And that's something I want to stress with me, is that I do look at the metabolism, but I kind of, in my book, I describe it as the 2 layers, sort of looking down on Piccadilly Circus, where you have all the gene mutations going on, and this is where Astron will help. And then underneath that, you have this underground system, this network going on of these metabolic changes. And every cancer has kind of like a default setting for a particular metabolic fingerprint. And this is something I really want to encourage people to understand. And then you layer on that different things that are sort of the genetic mutations on top and how that can affect you. In fact, I didn't look at your data stuff until today, and I realized you had a P10 loss. So I was going, oh, adenocarcinoma, well, that's mostly glutamine driven, that's oxphos driven, a bit of fatty acid oxidation. And then I saw your report and it showed P10 loss. So I no, it's definitely going to be glycolysis as well in a big way. So it does matter, and actually having that metabolic fingerprint and actually layering in these other aspects to it is really important. But anyway, going back to how we met and how much involvement I've had with you. We met through LinkedIn, really, because you previously worked and lived in Guernsey. So you know a few of my relatives. I think you even had, did you have a relationship with my lawyer out there? I can't remember. But so there are a few sort of personal. Yeah, okay. So right. So a few links there going on. And it was, your story was so compelling, and and if you're not following Dale on LinkedIn, I do urge you to follow him on LinkedIn, because he shares some fantastic, funny little clips, and you post all the time. I don't know how you come up with so many ideas to post all the time, but and then I see some of your posts, and I haven't really been that involved. I kind of assume the patient, I try and give you enough empowerment through reading the book, getting the right team together, and you've got a fantastic team here, so that you can actually work things out yourself. But I do see you posting some things on LinkedIn that kind of make me a little bit concerned, particularly as I thought that you had adenocarcinoma and that it was mostly glutamine, oxphos driven, etc. And then you're posting about extreme keto, and I met you, and you were definitely doing an extreme ketogenic diet and vegan, which is probably a good thing as well. But anyway, so there were certain things that were worrying me a lot when I look at some of your posts. You've been doing some fasting, some 10-day fasting, which again, I'm thinking, oh, crikes, are you, what's happened to the autophagy? And autophagy can be really upregulated with cancer. So I'm kind of watching from a distance. I feel like I have to come charging in just to try and check that you're okay. NAC is another thing that you started talking about, and I was really worried about your use of that. And and I have to check that you are empowered enough to know the reasons why you're doing it, and the dosage and the timing and the how long you're going to do it, etc. I think is so important, and we can talk more maybe a bit about that later on. But certainly, a few of these things were causing me a certain amount of concern. But I've not really been that much involved with your care. I'm much more of a friend. We've got big plans to launch a charity together, to do some big stuff, I think, in the future. So I'm trying to reel back from helping patients on a one-to-one basis and try and help more patients on a 1 to 1,000 basis. I really want to help encourage patients to go down this route, to know the options that are there, to understand the metabolism, to understand how to change the way that the cancer behaves. But I'm a fellow, sure people know my story, but as a fellow cancer patient, I completely get your headset, where you are with your attitude. You'll go for it. I mean, you're totally fearless. I totally respect that. Everything you say on LinkedIn is like, wow, he's not bothered by anybody's criticizing him or coming up with anything. I think you've done an amazing job. So fantastic, Dale. I'm so pleased you are where you are. It's still very early days. Let's just remind people that it's only 9-10 months since you started treatment. Very early days. And there are certain aspects that I just, I do need to talk to you. Having looked at all your info, I think we do need to have a proper chat and maybe have another session where we talk to whoever wants to come back on with looking at more of the metabolic phenotype and looking at the different pathways that may be particularly involved for you. I've done a load of work on slides, which we're not going to show today, but I think this is an opportunity for maybe another learning session in the future. So I'm going to shut up now. Hand back to you, Travis or Dale.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Jane. So the last member of the panel, an integral part of Dale's team, is Amanda King, who's a nutritionist. And we've talked a lot about drug repurposing. Amanda obviously specializes in the nutritional aspect. And this, to me, often gets marginalized. This is a passion Amanda and I both share, this idea of all of these overlapping lifestyle interventions that, as we know, if many of you aren't aware, there's a study on exercise that just came out that was absolutely astonishing. The study was the first extremely well done study that showed a hugely significant reduction in recurrence with a moderate exercise program. So Amanda, when it comes to diet, nutrition, and these whole lifestyle packages, that's your expertise. So take it from here.
Okay, great stuff. It's been such a privilege to work with such an experienced team, and great to hear everybody's involvement. Every single time I hear Dale's story, I just feel overwhelmed. I think it's just incredible what Dale's achieved. And it's been great to be a part of it. So it is true that I come at this from a different kind of angle. So, and in a way, this is part of how building a team with different kinds of expertise is important, because yes, you need your integrative oncologist to work and treat the cancer, and the Astron report has been invaluable in taking things to the next level. When I originally met Dale, when Dale came to me, this was back in, I think it was November last year, and he was looking for somebody like Harry. He was looking for Harry, and so we decided to work together, and he did go on a ketogenic diet very quickly. And the way that I work is with the metabolic approach to cancer. So my training is with Naisha Winters at Metabolic Regen. And we're trained to work through a methodology where we don't treat cancer. We work with cancer. We support people with cancer. We work on the terrain. So this is instead of looking, although we can take into account things like genetic mutations and the kind of more specifics of the cancer itself, we look at the whole person. So we look at nutritional deficiencies. We look at the bloods. What are they telling us? What is the individual's lifestyle like? What kind of a person are they? What is their personality? And what kind of a track record have they had? Invariably, we'll find that people have had a lot of stress. They've had a big stressful event leading up to a diagnosis and things like that. So it's really important to understand the whole picture. So when I work with people, it's kind of more based around a much more naturopathic paradigm, and it complements protocols like Hari's protocol with Astron. And actually now we've got this data from Astron, which can tell us which supplements will have a certain amount of impact on these kinds of individual cancers. It allows the naturopathic paradigm to be much more tailored. It's actually really interesting because previously, my work is centered around data. And for those of you that read things like The Metabolic Nutritionist, which I write a lot on Substack about, actually at the moment off-label drugs as it happens, but also supplements and the keto diet, lots of different things to do with cancer. But specifically, we're really looking at things to support. We're looking at ways to support each other, ways to integrate paradigms so that we can get the best outcomes for everyone. I actually have just realized I haven't said what my background is either. So previously, I trained as a nutritionist and with a massive interest in sort of kind of primal ancestral paleo nutrition. I've had a massive interest in CrossFit for years and this kind of innate lifestyle and innate nutrition. And then I went on to study naturopathy with the College of Naturopathic Medicine. Then after that, I studied nutrigenomics and worked quite heavily with methylation, which piqued a huge interest in biochemistry, which made me a bit of a science nerd, I think, from there. And then I've always been a bit of a writer. So I did quite a lot of articles on Substack, which, like I say, lots of you will know about. And then after that, I studied integrative oncology. It's now integrative metabolic oncology with metabolic regen. And that brings me up to here. So really delighted to be a part of this panel and team.
Thank you, Amanda. It's interesting to me. When we think of a lot of these things, we underappreciated the effect. And what I think about is the data on support, on not being lonely with cancer outcomes. And there's very good studies on people that do have these support networks. The outcomes are incredible. There was one study on rats, which are extremely social creatures. It scrubbed away all the biases you could have in an experiment like that, where the rats were put in groups. These rats were predisposed to mammary tumors, or they were put in cages in isolation. And you would not believe the difference in tumor volume, size, and mortality in the rats that were lonely. So Dale, that brings us back to you. You are creating this network of support where people don't have to feel lonely. And I think that's an aspect of healthcare that's completely underappreciated. The biochemistry and the genetics is absolutely beautiful. It's a new branch called social genomics, which dives right into the immune system. When people have support, their immune system are geared toward a steered response, not this sort of chronic inflammatory response. So again, it takes us back to these fundamentals of that, Amanda, you are so good at with just basic lifestyle things and support. Okay, that's everybody in the panel now. We have about 15 minutes left, and let's get really informal and just go to a discussion of anything anybody else wants to talk about. One thing I would like to talk about too is what we see as the future of medicine, the next 5 to 10 years, where you think oncology goes, what you would like to see. I think the trajectory has been stagnant for a long time. And how do we get past where we are, this stagnant place that we are?
Do you want me to kick that?
Just go ahead.
Do you want me to kick that off, Trav? With a bit of context, and then smarter people can discuss the context. I think just the context for me is that oncology is one of the few fields that is almost completely wedded to the only level of evidence being acceptable in the conventional world being a double-blind randomized control trial. And And what's absolutely stark is that those trials to, get a drug approved cost, new drug approvals cost $2 to $4 billion now. The trials, and the discovery process takes 12 to 15 years. And drug companies, therefore, there is a huge amount of risk at the end of the day. Yes, they're trying to do good, but also they've got to make the R&D and the risk worth it. So when we identify the target that works, if you look at the number of drug companies that are working on the ALK mutation in lung cancer, it's crazy. There are loads of drugs being approved for that because that's a target where if you get the right drug, you can get $100,000 of reimbursement per month for the next 5 years because the patient will do really well and be really stable. And that's brilliant for the patients, but we need to try and hit all those other targets. But conventional drug development and clinical trial design, which is absolutely vital, of course, isn't going to solve that problem when we've got all of these molecular discrepancies at a metabolic, at a transcriptomic, at a genomic, at an immune, at a microbiomic level, ultimately. And so I think the way I try to frame it is, trying to create a protocol to find the truth in that individual and divorce it from the type of cancer they have, but look at the exact personal omic levels of that patient is where we're going to try and go. And trying to do that in a traditional clinical trial structure is really hard because what you end up doing is finding an algorithm that might work for one patient and not another, and an intervention that works for one patient and not another, even though they look exactly the same on paper. So that's my bit of context. How we go about marrying that to getting the right data in the right group of patients to take things forward in a time scale that is not decades, it's months and years. That's the challenge.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point for everybody because often we get the question about what about a certain type of cancer? And the beauty of a lot of these methodologies, Jane's, Amanda's, Pad's, is largely agnostic of the type of cancer. We're targeting sort of the ubiquitous metabolic changes or the specific mutations within a person's cancer. So the type starts to become less relevant. Okay, who else? Anybody else have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think Pat kind of nailed it, right? I think the issue is trial design. Working in early phase trials, essentially, the trial unit is basically it's a business, right? So a drug company pays a certain fee to get certain things done and pays for patient travel, etc., to get the data. It's a business for data. I always used to think, surely ideally, if we believe in metabolic syndrome being an issue of all the different chronic disease states that come under this heading of metabolic syndrome, maybe one day we'll be better at sort of capturing metabolic dysfunction, with the screening programs and blood tests that can use whatever dedicated tools to identify issues before they manifest in a way where, again, as you know, from all of these angles, lifestyle, supplemental, whatever it might be, off labels, we can curtail, the sort of presentation of disease. Hearing Pat speak, the glaring sort of term, as we all are aware of now, AI, right? So some sort of system one day that can ascertain, look at all this information, all of these little bits of information on the individual, and tailor make, a strategy, and maybe that would need to be repeated at different intervals. Because I even think, for example, we think with Exacta data, the findings by next generation sequencing, what if they change? But a patient can't well afford repeating said tests on a regular basis. So one day in the future, when, as we're hoping, the cost will come down and down and down and down, and it'll be very straightforward to do informative next-gen sequencing tests on blood, let alone circulating tumor cell counts or the minimal residual disease studies that are going on at the moment in terms of, picking up and capturing disease early, we'll be in a better position to treat. So I think it's that blend of technology and sort of being able to monitor all of these different information sets to kind of formulate individual tailored plans using technology, screening better, being able to actually plug in patients earlier to the system where they can have more in-depth evaluations. Because as you know, as human beings, we typically wait for shit to hit the fan before something happens. You have a heart attack, then you start to worry about going for a walk and reducing the stress, whatever it might be. So we often need that crossroads of opportunity. But if our ability to screen earlier, and capture earlier before, as I said, these sequelae kind of manifest, then obviously that would also tie in really well. So I think a blend of those ideas, hopefully. How long that will take? Another question, as you said, Pat.
Yeah. Well, we have a few minutes left. I think, Dale, we should close with you. And since we have hundreds of people on this call, you've just experienced this journey, and you've been so forthright with your story. Would you like to leave like any thoughts, any advice for the people that are just starting down this journey?
So thank you, Travis. First of all, to try and address a couple of the comments I've just seen pop through at the same time, try and tie it all into one. So final thoughts. So I'd like to indicate to anyone on the line, the first thing that I think anybody in this fight needs is the ability to self-advocate. For me, being able to stand up and be your own advocate, being able to stand up and actually take responsibility for your journey, being able to find the team who work for you, because the team who worked for me, the guys on the phone here, as well as Dr. Isabella Cooper and my partner, etc., are not going to be the same team who work for everyone. Everybody has different wants. Everybody has a different cancer. Everybody's journey is personal to them. Everybody needs to find the people who, first of all, resonate with them, and second of all, the pathway that works for them, for their morals, for their specific cancer and their specific genetic setup. This has worked for me because I followed that pathway, because I stopped and I decided to research heavily myself, and I have learned to understand what my cancer is fed by, how it's fed. I've learned to do a little bit of experimentation with myself as well. As Jane rightly pointed out, some of the things I do aren't quite what you should do in these situations. Some of the things I do are just to test something out on myself. And Amanda has been fantastic at helping me to test, the outcome of those bloods when I do take something that is slightly different or down a rabbit hole. But what I would try to indicate is to anyone on the line, first of all, the science should be the first and foremost. It should be the king. You shouldn't run off and take horse drugs, etc. It should be about following proper human scale, human grade drugs, using somebody like Dr. Kuhan, who is an expert in those, building your protocol around your cancer and building your direction around your own advocacy, your own wants, and how you want to tackle your cancer. No two people are the same. No two people will have the same outcome. No two people's genetics are the same. And just because I created a protocol and did this, it doesn't mean that protocol will work for you or for anybody else. And that is also why you won't see me share my entire protocol on social media. It's why you will only ever see me talk about some of the things that I do and some of the things that I know happen to be under prescription on purpose, because you can't just go and take them, because what I do might be dangerous for you. And I suppose one last point is, as Jane has already touched on it, just to make everyone on the call aware, Jane and myself will also be setting up, or have also begun setting up, a charity to support the use of off-label drugs across the UK. The charity is going to be called Beyond the Standard. It's going to take us a little while, a few months at least, in order to get that off the ground with the Charities Commission. And then we will be looking at how to best support everybody in the UK cancer oncological space who is looking at, who is trying to use, who is intrigued by, who wants to go the direction of off-label and adjunct therapies, but doesn't yet have a, first of all, support network, second of all, a starting point for their research, and third of all, a group to essentially advocate for them in this.
Yeah, I just want to say, Dale, I'm absolutely looking forward to actually taking this forward. We've got some big plans, big ideas. We've got some big names coming on board to help us with this. Very excited for being able to share that with everybody and to encourage people to look more and to teach, maybe even get into some of the medical schools and teach as well. Really like to get into to get the doctors to try and understand cancer metabolism, because currently they have very little understanding of it. So I'm very, very keen about the future, Dale, about what's going to happen. Fantastic. You're such a great advocate. I totally get where you're coming from. You and I are totally driven to forward this repurposing mission. We want more people to understand it, to realize the benefits, and it's not alternative. Have to stress that it is complementary to any other treatment that you're doing. And Astron, I think, plays a big part in this. Certainly, it revealed certain aspects of your tumor that I didn't know, and made sense to me as to why some of the treatments that you did work. I would like to repeat this because I can see a lot of the comments coming in saying, I really want to know what you actually did. And Dale, I don't know if you're happy to do this, to do another session together, and maybe get some of the other people on this panel to talk a little bit more specifically. But I know you don't want to share too much, maybe, I don't know. But it's up to you. I'll let you answer that and see where we go.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more than happy to do another panel and delve further into it. It will have to be with the caveat that, you know, what I've done is specifically for me and based on my genetics and based on my generation sequencing, which came from Aston Health. And a lot of what I've done wouldn't be recommended in most people's situations. If that is understood, then I'd be happy to share my protocol and I'd be happy to share what I did as part of that further deep dive. Just
Wonderful.
very aware we kept it nice and light today.
Wonderful. Yeah, we are right at the end, so that's perfect. We'll conclude it there. But Dale, we can't thank you enough for your advocacy, your transparency, your charm, your wit, everything. I think we're all in agreement that you're a rock star and are a huge net positive to the community. So thank you everybody in the panel. And I think, Pat, are we doing a follow-up with questions? You want to?
Yeah, we will be doing a follow-up with questions. We will be publishing this so that anyone that's missed it or has had issues with audio will be able to watch the whole thing. We will also be sending out a list of everyone's contact details. So if you want to get hold of Jane or Amanda or Harry or Dale or whoever, myself even, we're very, very, very happy to do that. And we will also be taking suggestions for follow-up webinars. James just talked about one there. I think if this is something that's useful, clearly, I'm sure that we would all love to just help, because I think the one thing is, Dale, I know a lot of you're not comfortable taking these platitudes. I know that, but sometimes I talked about inertia, before, and I've been the kind of doctor on the other side in the really busy NHS clinic where you come home and you see a lot of patients in a lot of time, and you're very limited about what you can do, and you feel like you fail people sometimes. And every single one of those doctors, scientists, advocates that work in that system want the very best. They do. And it's the system that we need to try and evolve. And patients like you and stories like yours, whilst on their own, they can't change the whole way we work because the NHS couldn't afford this in the UK for every single patient. But it does give us that joy and that chutzpah and that kind of magic that enables us to get those conversations started. So I think, certainly for me, you're one of those people that just has, I know in 5 years' time when it gets tough, people like you will make me want to keep going. So I thank you for that and keep doing it. And I'm sure there's lots of other patients like you and doctors and scientists like you out there as well. Travis, you're another one. So keep doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. You guys, I'll leave. The last thought I'll leave is we have a famous doctor here in the United States, Atul Gawande, who talks about medicine was always built in this ethos of the sovereignty of the medical professional, the doctor. And there used to be a time when the doctor could practice medicine. We have outstripped that time times 10. The complexity of medicine, the amount of data requires pit crews, requires multidisciplinary teams that can focus and sift through the incredible amount of data that there is. So that approach of a single doctor is rapidly becoming outdated. And that's, I think, the take-home message of all of this. So thank you, everybody. And we're going to leave it right there. Have a great rest of the evening and great rest of the afternoon in the United States.